Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my festive holiday book garden. Today, we will be continuing our holiday special fanfic reads with another Scumville Self-Saving System fanfic, Competitive Parenting for Dummies by Scholomancefan. I think I'm saying that correctly, but if I'm not, I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting read. The original work, Scumville Self-Saving System, belongs to MXTX, but the fanfic belongs to Scholomancefan. And they are being very kind to let me read this. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Okay. Competitive Parenting for Dummies. Peak Lord Shen acquires a baby. Peak Lord Liu acquires a baby. Their rivalry goes very differently after that. Notes. Someone on Reddit mentioned how much they loved parental Shen Jiu. My brain took that in and spat out this bunny. I don't know if I'll continue it or not, but the concept did amuse me, so I wrote this little blurb. I'll add more as I think of it. Probably. I'm open to suggestions from my dear inspired readers. Chapter 1. Prologue. It was quiet in Mooching Fang's office. This was generally accepted by Qian Kao Peak as a sign that something really crazy was about to happen. Mooching Fang's head disciple, Ren Ya, fought the urge to bite her nails to soothe her nerves. It was a full moon, too, and everyone knew things were always worse on a full moon. No one knew why, but it was statistically documented medical fact. She was almost relieved when Peak Lord of Qingjing Peak, Shen Jiu, rushed in holding a crying baby. This was probably weird enough to qualify all on its own. Mooching Fang looked up when he heard the wailing, then dropped his brush and stared. It rolled away off the desk and under one of the nearby chairs. Gods above, he croaked. Why do you have a baby? Shen Jiu looked cool and unaffected as always, despite the red-faced child in his arms that was screaming in decibels that made Ren Ya flinch. Just examine him and tell me what's wrong, Mushidi, Shen Jiu drawled, barely audible above the din. I'm not a pediatrician, Mooching Fang said faintly. Shen Jiu turned to look at Ren Ya instead, so she scuttled behind the desk and pretended to look for Mooching Fang's brush. Shen Jiu returned the full force of his glare to Mooching Fang, who wilted under the stare as caustic as the acid of the nine-tailed ivory serpent. Was there a precipitating event? Mooching Fang asked, reaching out to take the baby from Shen Jiu's arms. Ren Ya realized that the crying sounds were intensifying and now coming in stereo. She peeked over the desk just in time to see Lu Qingge slam the door open and rush in with a second wailing baby. This one looked slightly bigger and older and had an enormous bump on the center of its forehead. In the stunned silence that followed, Lu Qingge shoved past Shen Jiu to place his baby in Mooching Fang's outstretched arms. Mooching Fang looked at the baby he was holding as though he suddenly had cause to doubt the nature of reality itself. Oh God, they're multiplying, Ren Ya heard him mutter under his breath. Ren Ya began to wonder if her Shizun was about to have a psychotic break, and if the shelter she had behind the desk was more dubious than expected. I was here first, Shen Jiu snapped at Lu Qingge, who bristled. Shen Jiu and Lu Qingge were infamous for taking every available opportunity to fight, and this was a small space. Probably still best to remain behind the desk, then. Ming-Yan is crying harder, Lu Qingge said bluntly, so she should be seen first. Indeed, the child in Shen Jiu's arms had calmed to tiny sobs and was turning to curiously examine the Lu Ming-Yan baby that Mu Fang held. Shen Jiu glared at Lu Qingge and pinched the baby he held. The screaming resumed. In the midst of the resulting cacophony, Mu Fang calmly took out a pair of earplugs, an essential tool for peak lord meetings, and apparently pediatric checkups now too. He set Lu Mingyan down on his table and began to examine her, paying particular attention to the lump on her head. How did she injure herself? He asked Lu Qingge. Shen Jiu, realizing he'd been thwarted, scowled deeply in a way that promised subtle vengeance that the entirety of Qiankao would soon have to endure. Renya made a mental note to go on extended off-peak missions, stat. She fell off the roof, Lu Qingge explained. What? Mu Qingfang and Shen Jiu said. Renya nudged Mu Qingfang and gestured at his ears. He sighed and removed the earplugs, then asked Lu Qingge to repeat himself. She fell off the roof, Lu Qingge said again, as though this was a simple fact that needed no context whatsoever. Babies fell off roofs all the time. Simple fact. How did she get on the roof? Renya asked, morbid curiosity piqued. She climbed, Lu Qingge replied. Mu Qingfan pinched the bridge of his nose. Have you heard of baby-proofing? Shen Jiu and Lu Qingge both frowned. Shit. That was a no. Shen Jiu whipped out a fan and attempted to look like a lofty, wise, above-it-all immortal, but it was too late. Renya and Mu Qingfan had both seen the flush of panic on his face. You will both need to make your residences safe, particularly if you plan to keep these babies there long term? His voice rose into an anxious, questioning tone. The concept of them keeping the babies was almost as absurd as the concept of them showing up with babies in tow at all. I'll write up a list you can take to Shang Qinghua, Lu Qingfang said with a sigh. He turned to look for his ink brush. Lu Mingyan had seized it and was happily splashing ink all over Mu Qingfang's recently completed paperwork. Renya blinked at her, baffled. Hadn't the brush rolled onto the floor? How had she gotten a hold of it? Lu Mingyan was now covered in ink stains that didn't quite obscure the giant red welt on her head. Shen Jiu looked at the picture she made and sneered. He stepped away with his immaculately dressed, clean, and well-tended baby, who had subsided in his crying and was now imitating a sleepy little angel. Renya could swear that Peak Lord was striking a pose. He looked smugly down his nose at Lu Qingge. Lu Qingge didn't seem to notice Shen Jiu's smugness or Mu Qingfan's despair at the ruined paperwork. He just looked at Mu Qingfang searchingly as though expecting the man to produce the list right away. On his desk, Lu Mingyan began to eat the brush. I can see you're busy, Shen Jiu said, voice dripping with disdain. I will expect your list to be delivered to my bamboo house within the hour. Jade eyes creased with a merciless smile. And Yuan and I will return later, when this brute and his spawn are done. Renya gave in and nibbled her thumbnail at the thought of a reprise of this event. Shen Jiu swept out the door with all the panache of a melodramatic supervillain exiting stage left. The effect was only slightly marred by a sleepy baby hand-waving a gentle goodbye at them over his shoulder. Lu Qingge continued to wait and stare at Mu Qingfang. Lu Mingyan switched to eating the paperwork. Mu Qingfang buried his face in his hands. So I forgot that there was art for this. 1 second. Okay. Here is the first drawing. Okay. Oh, I need to see. Okay. And this was drawn by Scholomancefan. Like it. Okay. Chapter 2, Peak Lord Meeting. Notes. The concept of Lu Qingge getting Ming Yuan comes from Tossaway's "Hey, share the weight a little," which I love. In the last chapter and this one, Shen Yuan is around 8 months old, and Lu Mingyan is around 10 months old. The peak lords assembled were a sight to behold. Each of them a beautiful gem, a demonstration of the elegance of an immortal. It was a shame that any time they were together, they spoiled the effect by gossiping like fishwives. Can you believe Shen Jiu has a baby? What kind of woman would leave their baby with a man like that? Outrageous! The only outrageous thing was that Wei Qingwei and Qi Qingqi were talking like that in the same room as Shen Qingqiu and assuming he couldn't hear. Did they think he was deaf? Shen Qingqiu pulled his fan out of reach of Shen Yuan once again. The boy was obsessed with getting a hold of it, for reasons that Shen Qingqiu had yet to understand. The muttering shifted to an ominous silence, and then Qi Qingqi approached him. Shen Qingqiu glared down at Shen Yuan. This child was ruining his aura of aloof mystique already. Shen Shixian, we were wondering, where did he come from? Qi Qingqi asked Shen Qingqiu directly. Obnoxious wench. I grew him in my vegetable garden, Shen Qingqiu deadpanned. Qi Qingqi blinked, nonplussed. No doubt that was not the kind of hoeing she had been imagining in her tawdry little mind. Shen Qingqiu had seen what came out of the writing workshops of Xianshu Peak and was well aware that Qi Qingqi must be deeply deprived to enable such insults to the field of literature. No offense, Shen Shixian, Wei Qingwei said cheerfully, but you can't blame us for being curious. You must be the peak lord I'd least expect to turn up with a baby. Lu Qingge walked in carrying Lu Mingyan on his hip. Never mind, I stand corrected, Wei Qingwei muttered, wide-eyed. Lu Qingge settled himself next to Shen Qingqiu and Shen Yuan and placed Lu Mingyan between them. Shen Qingqiu eyed them both skeptically and kept Shen Yuan firmly on his lap. Shen Yuan reached for the fan, but was once again thwarted. Yu Qingyuan gave a quiet hum to get the attention of the room. I believe we are still waiting on Mu Shidi, but perhaps it would be best to begin. Mu Qingfang came rushing in with a sheaf of messy ink-stained papers. Apologies, Zhangmin Shixian, he said as he took a seat. My peak is struggling with an infestation of razor-winged blue hornets. They've stung 7 disciples already. And my head disciple left to go visit her sick grandmother. So we're overwhelmed and understaffed at the moment. He looked stressed and harried. Shen Qingqiu did not smirk. He raised his fan and flapped gently twice. He was cool, elegant. He definitely had not lured the razor-winged blue hornets there with their favorite plant, the blue fescue. He was above such petty moral slights. Yu Qingyuan gave Shen Qingqiu a look. Blast. That man could read Shen Jiu like an open book. One more thing on the list of reasons to hate him. Shen Jiu did his best to look even more serene. Shen Yuan reached up and tugged at the wrist holding the fan. Shen Jiu looked down to gently thwomp him with it. Be careful what you wish for, child. When Shen Jiu returned to looking back at Yu Qingyuan, the man's gaze had inexplicably softened from accusation to fondness. Fuck you, Shen Jiu thought at him. Shen Jiu looked away first. Let us begin the meeting, then, since we are all here, he announced. The meeting went about as well as it normally did. Mu Qingfeng kept his earplugs at hand and put them in when the arguments got particularly rowdy. For similar reasons, Yuan Qingyu of Shuxian Peak kept a bottle of strong liquor at hand and took a drink every time Yu Qingyuan tried and failed to calm things down. Shen Jiu stared off into space and thought about his latest poem. It really was not coming together, but perhaps this would be good inspiration. And so the sounds of great horns came, heralding the lords of empty minds, who made noise only to hear the sound. Shen Jiu nodded to himself and wrote the idea down, careful to look as though he was merely taking notes on the very active discussion between Qi Qingqi and Shen Qinghua on sexist undergarment purchasing policies. Qi Qingqi looked seconds away from shredding Shen Qinghua's face. Shen Qinghua's latest baby-proofing recommendations had been complete failures, so Shen Jiu thought he might regrettably have to root for Qi Qingqi this time. Shen Yuan watched the proceedings with a wide-eyed look of awe. Yes, child, they really were all like that. Lu Mingyan, likely reflecting the inner feelings of her older brother, was rolling around on the floor in a clear display of utter boredom. Then she was attempting to crawl away, to get back into mischief, no doubt. With one hand, Lu Qingge reached out and picked her up and moved her back to her starting point. She crawled away once more. Lu Qingge pulled her back again. They repeated this over and over as the meeting dragged on. Shen Jiu's eye twitched. These two stubborn idiots deserved each other. He was very glad his Yuan was not like that. Shen Yuan affected a look of displeasure and waved a fan in front of his face, creating a breeze that shifted the fine hairs on his head. Shen Jiu snatched his fan back and whacked Shen Yuan on the head with it again. And one final item, a request from Qingjing to Qiankao Peak for development of a pediatric department? Yu Qingyuan read from the notes. Finally. Seconded by Bison Peak, Lu Qingge said quickly. Mu Qingfeng steeled himself. We are already understaffed, and retraining any of the disciples for a pediatric specialization would require a great deal of time and energy. He went on to list a myriad of excuses as to why he couldn't fulfill the basics of his job. Shen Jiu suddenly regretted the razor-winged blue hornets. He should have gone with their more dangerous cousin, the razor-winged invisible hornet. He hoped his glare at the back of Mu Qingfeng's head was getting through. Just being on the fringes of it was certainly making Yu Qingyuan look increasingly more nervous. Oh, Mu Shidi, I'm afraid you will just have to accommodate this request. Yu Qingyuan finally crumbled. Ha! Mu Qingfeng bowed his head, a man defeated. Shen Jiu struck pose number 12, lofty, undefeatable, immortal scholar. It had just the right dose of smug victory for this. Thank you, Mu Shidi, rumbled Lu Qingge, lifting the crawling Lu Mingyan up so that her arms and legs dangled. She struggled, limbs flailing. Then she curled into a ball and tried to bite his fingers. Yes, thank you, Mu Shidi, Shen Jiu repeated, squeezing as much condescension into the words as he could manage. Shen Yuan unfolded his stolen fan in front of Shen Jiu's face with a dramatic flick. Not bad. I can hear myself getting nasally, so hang on. Gotta love flu season. Chapter 3. Sleepover Party. Notes. The enthusiasm in your comments is too inspiring. Here, have another chapter. In this one, Shen Yuan is around 13 months old and Lu Ming Yuan is around 15 months old. Look, this book says you're supposed to be walking now. So walk, Shen Jiu demanded. He and Shen Yuan were practicing on the veranda of the bamboo house. Shen Yuan did not walk. He looked back at Shen Jiu and just sat there blowing spit bubbles. Shen Jiu sighed in exasperation and pulled Shen Yuan up to standing. Shen Yuan let his legs fold beneath him and went back to sitting once more. Shen Jiu scowled. The book that laid open beside him claimed that children at this age should be learning to walk and taking their first steps. Another entirely contradictory parenting book was underneath and claimed that children would each do things in their own time, but that was clearly touchy-feely nonsense. A third book was underneath that one and stated that Shen Yuan should already be walking. Shen Jiu tried not to think about that book, dreading the thought of Shen Yuan already falling behind his peers. Why were all these parenting books so inconsistent? When Shen Jiu had all this parenting stuff figured out, he was going to write his own, and it would be the definitive work in the genre. In the meantime, Shen Jiu prodded Shen Yuan again. No, Shen Yuan said, pouting. His first word. Shen Jiu made a note of it. This is also a milestone and therefore acceptable. We will continue to practice walking tomorrow, he told Shen Yuan. The touchy-feely book had told him to talk to Shen Yuan to improve brain development, and although he thought the book was stupid, he also figured he was better at trying it than not. Just in case. Who are you talking to? Asked Lu Qingge as he approached, Lu Ming Yan in his arms. He set her down and she toddled over to Shen Yuan. Shen Jiu scowled. Yuan. Because books on the subject of parenting, Shen Jiu said loftily, recommend speaking to children to improve brain and speech development. Lu Qingge raised an eyebrow. Why are you reading books about it? Shen Jiu looked at him incredulously. To figure out what we're supposed to be doing, obviously. Lu Qingge began to look intrigued at this. Does it work? He ventured hopefully. Shen Jiu went back to scowling. He slammed the book shut. Not at all. There was a loud thud as Lu Ming Yan pushed Shen Yuan over. Shen Jiu reached over and rescued Shen Yuan from her clutches. In his arms, Shen Yuan whimpered and clung to Shen Jiu's robes. Quit it. You're wrinkling them, Shen Jiu hissed to Shen Yuan. Then he turned to Lu Qingge. What are you doing here, brute? Shen Jiu drawled. Just bringing your spawn over to harass Yuan? Lu Qingge nodded solemnly. I have a mission. Mu Qingfang says Lu Ming Yuan can't go and needs to stay somewhere baby-proofed, so she can stay with you. Here? Shen Jiu was outraged. I'm not watching her for you. Don't you have underlings that can watch her? Wait, you can't handle two? Lu Qingge retorted. Shen Jiu bristled at this insult. Of course he could handle two. Babies were easy to manage. How dare Lu Qingge insult him like this? Lu Qingge nodded. I will be back tomorrow. And then without another word, he strode away and took off on his sword. Shen Jiu looked at Lu Ming Yan. Your brother is an idiot, he told her. She nodded back solemnly. Well, perhaps she was salvageable then. Shen Yuan crawled off Shen Jiu's lap. Shen Jiu eyed Lu Ming Yan. and then pulled Shen Yuan up to standing once more. "No," said Shen Yuan, and went back to crawling. Lu Mingyan eyed him curiously, then toddled into the bamboo house through the open door. As Shen Qingchu turned to watch her, Shen Yuan crawled off the edge of the veranda and tumbled into the grass below. Even though the ground was soft, Shen Yuan was upset by the impact and began to wail. Shen Qingchu went over to pick him up and heard a crash from inside the bamboo house. A suspicious and unnerving silence followed. With Shen Yuan secure in his arms, Shen Qingchu rushed back into the bamboo house to find Lu Mingyan sitting on top of his tea table and splashing in the remains of his breakfast. She had somehow managed to spray kanji several feet away from where she was sitting. It was a radius of destruction to rival the war god of Kangqian sword's glare attack. "I take it back, you're both awful," Shen Qingchu told her. In response, Lu Mingyan smacked a spoon, launching it end over end across the room, trailing kanji behind it. Shen Yuan calmed down to watch the show, so Lu Qingge set him down on a convenient corner of the floor and attempted to remove the breakfast leftovers from Lu Mingyan's reach. She didn't appear to mind, happily smacking the food she had already spilled all across the table. Rice grains from the kanji landed in her hair and dotted Shen Qingchu's robes. Shen Jiu was a cool, remote peak lord. He was an immortal scholar with all the trappings and respect that this engendered. He did not panic. He very calmly shouted for his head disciple, Kai Fang. It was not a cry for help. It was a command for her presence. No one came. Shen Qingchu cursed under his breath. She was likely at chin practice at this time and therefore out of earshot. Deciding to give up on the furniture, Shen Qingchu grabbed a nearby towel and wrapped Lu Mingyan in it like a cocoon, securing the ends with a little dose of qi. He set her down on the floor, away from the horrible mess that she had made. She giggled at him and began to inch her way around like a tiny caterpillar. Wait, where did Yuan go? Darting into the adjacent room, the first thing Shen Qingchu saw was that Shen Yuan had gotten into his meticulously organized fan collection. Well, it had been meticulously organized. It was now a pile on the floor. Curse Shen Qinghua and his completely useless baby-proof locks. They made everything fiendishly difficult to open. Even some of Shen Qingchu's more witless disciples were completely stymied by them. And yet, at the same time, the locks didn't even seem to slow Shen Yuan down. Shen Qingchu made a mental note to write another threatening letter to Ding Peak. Shen Qinghua was clearly incompetent and needed some extra motivation. Yielding to the inevitable, Shen Qingchu gave Shen Yuan one of the cheaper and less favored fans. He scooped up the rest of the heap and stashed it on a high shelf that would, he hoped, keep them away from his precocious child. Shen Yuan watched him hide the rest of the fan collection and flapped his new fan, grinning victoriously. Shen Qingchu picked Shen Yuan up and settled him on his hip, then mentally steeled himself and went back for Lu Mingyan. The towel he had wrapped her in was lying open, puddled on the floor. Lu Mingyan herself had somehow gotten up onto the counter where he had put his ruined breakfast remnants. Kanji now trailed all over the counter and down the cabinets. She was using a spoon to fling what little she could scrape up at the walls and even the ceiling. How had she even gotten up there? Shen Qinghua mentally calculated how much time was left in Kai Fang's chin class. Then, with dawning horror, he realized that if he called her or anyone for help now, they would actually see this disaster and be sure to judge him for it. He was an immortal peak lord and had to look the part, but anyone who saw this would assume he was some kind of idiot who couldn't even wrangle two babies for a she. Whether it was true or not was irrelevant. This was going to ruin his image. Lu Mingyan pushed a bowl off the counter. As it smashed to pieces on the floor and sprayed yet more kanji remains, Shen Jiu's will also broke. He grabbed both babies and ran for the door. He could wait for Kai Fang's chin class to end, hidden in the trees nearby. At least there would be no kanji. When Lu Qingge finally returned from his mission, splattered with blood and gore, he received Lu Mingyan splattered with old kanji. She was tied up in intricately knotted immortal binding cable because Shen Jiu still couldn't figure out how she had gotten out of any lesser binding so quickly. She had nonetheless managed to get an arm free and was industriously working her way out of the rest of it. 3 Qingjing disciples stood off to the side, ready to weep with exhaustion and shame. They wore more kanji than Lu Mingyan, though less than Shen Jiu himself. Shen Jiu, for his part, stood proudly. If you couldn't compose yourself like an immortal master physically, he reasoned, you could still look the part with your presence. So even with food all up and down his robes and wrinkles from grabby little hands and chunks of hair falling loose from his crown, and Shen Yuan on his hip flapping away with a stained and shredded fan, Shen Jiu posed like he owned the world. Lu Qingge looked at Mingyan, and his eyes creased as he smiled fondly at her. Then he turned the look on Shen Jiu. "Thank you," he said. By the time Shen Jiu had blinked the stars from his eyes, Lu Qingge was long gone. His face felt hot, but Shen Yuan vigorously fanned him until the feeling faded. Chapter 4. Playdates. Shen Yuan is around 16 months and Lu Mingyan is around 18 months. Also, for people who understand tagging, are there any tags I should be using that I'm not? Please, help and thanks. When Shen Jiu walked into Mu Qingfang's office with Shen Yuan, as requested, he saw Yu Qingyuan standing behind the desk as well. An ambush. Neither had noticed him just yet. Mu Qingfang was sitting at his desk praying. Yu Qingyuan was not, but he was pacing behind Mu Qingfang's desk, looking very worried and staring distractedly off into space. Shen Jiu took the opportunity to back slowly out of the door. Perhaps he could... "Baba?" Shen Yuan asked, far too loudly. Mu Qingfang and Yu Qingyuan zeroed in on him like star-furred hounds on the hunt. Shen Jiu abandoned his attempt and strode back into the room like he was not intimidated at all. "They should be the ones intimidated, really." "Oh, but we're still waiting on, never mind," Yu Qingyuan said. Suspicious. "Oh, well, we have you alone, Shen Shixian. I would like to ask you about Shen Yuan's origins." Mu Qingfan began nervously. His hands twitched. "I heard a rumor that you grew him in your vegetable garden. If this is true, then it would be helpful for diagnostic purposes to know which plant specifically you used to gestate him." "That was a lie," Shen Jiu said. "He was born to my late wife, but she passed away a few months ago. Or a few months later. Very tragic. Don't ask me about it. I'm still grieving." "Oh," Mu Qingfang blurted in shock. "I didn't know you had a wife." "Not anymore," Shen Jiu replied. An awkward silence followed. Lu Qingge and Lu Mingyan arrived and broke the quiet like they broke, well, everything else. Shen Jiu glared. If he had known they were coming, he definitely would have burned the meeting request. Possibly also the messenger. "Well, now that everyone is here, we need to discuss social development." Mu Qingfang began with a faint tremble in his voice. "It, is important for a child's social development to socialize. with other children of a similar age regularly. Mu Ching Fang's voice grew quieter and quieter as he progressed through the sentence, clearly dreading reaching the end, but persisting nonetheless. The wheels clicked along in Shen Chu's head. He was no fool. King Qian was full of immortals and their disciples. There was only one other child in the entirety of the mountain range that came close to Shen Yuan's age. How regularly? Shen Chu's voice was like the breath of 1,000 winters, harsh, cold, and stripping all moisture from your skin to make your eyes water. As much as possible, Mu Qingfang equivocated. Daily, Yu Qingyuan said, with the finality of an axe felling a tree. For multiple shi. Ming Yan looked over at Shen Yuan and tackled him in a bear hug. Yuan, yes! No, 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 Shen Yuan shouted, wobbling under her weight and struggling to get free. Shen Chu quite agreed. Her? She's a terrible influence. I'm not sure I want Yuan exposed to her at all, he sniffed. Are you suggesting that there's something wrong with my sister? Lu Qingge bristled. That remains to be seen, Shen Chu sneered. But there's certainly something wrong with you. I suppose we'll find out if it's inheritable. Yu Qingyuan made a calming motion with his hands. Please, we really do need to consider what is best for the children. Shen Chu looked down at where Shen Yuan had collapsed to the ground and Lu Mingyan was laying on top of him. Lu Mingyan clearly wanted to wrestle with him. Shen Yuan clearly just wanted to get away. Shen Chu looked back at Yu Qingyuan and raised an eyebrow. It will be a learning experience, Yu Qingyuan said weakly. We will do it, Lu Qingge announced. Shen Chu glared at the infuriating man. We asked for pediatric medical advice. We should not ignore it, Lu Qingge pointed out, far too calmly and reasonably. You only say that because you've never had to deal with two at once, Shen Chu said bitterly. He was still not over the things Lu Mingyan had ruined in that singular day she had spent in his bamboo house. It went fine, Lu Qingge replied. Oblivious fool. In that case, you can handle the first round, Shen Chu challenged. Lu Qingge just nodded. Baba, no! Shen Yuan wailed, voice muffled from being buried under Lu Mingyan. She giggled at him. Hee. Toughen up, kid, Shen Chu advised, accidentally slipping into his old street accent. He then flushed under the weight of the stares of everyone in the room. He whirled around and departed, leaving his dear Yuan in the clutches of the terrible Lu Qingge. Let him figure out the logistics of getting two toddlers back to his peak and organizing playtime with them. Shen Chu still had not gotten revenge on Lu Qingge for dumping Lu Mingyan on him without warning 3 months ago. This should be adequate retribution. Shen Chu flew back to his peak, reveling in how quickly he could move without a wiggly child in tow. He did his paperwork, excited by how well he could focus without the constant interruptions of a bored, attention-seeking Shen Yuan. He painted, enjoying how he didn't have to put his brush ball down once to rescue Shen Yuan from some sort of trouble that he'd managed to get into. But he soon began to worry. Leaving Shen Yuan with that brute? Lu Qingge responsible for a child? Bad enough that he was in charge of Lu Mingyan. How could Shen Chu have left his precious Shen Yuan with him? This was Lu Qingge, who at one time hadn't noticed his own broken leg and walked around on it for hours, who had cut down a Virgin's Dew Saracena on a group night hunt, leading to the entire team of junior and senior disciples being infected with sex pollen, who had decided mountain climbing would be a good training exercise for his disciples and then forgotten to bring any equipment or supplies, and then decided to persist anyway, leading to the entirety of Bison Peak needing to be rescued from their own mountainside. How could he have left Shen Yuan with that brute? It had been almost a she already. Anything could happen. Full of anxiety and regret, Shen Jiu got on his sword and rushed over to Lu Qingge's house on Bison Peak. He was going... Sorry. He was going to give Lu Qingge 3 bruises for every one on his precious Shen Yuan's head. Shen Yuan and Lu Qingge were in the main room of the house. Lu Qingge was practicing sword forms. Shen Yuan was painting. Lu Mingyan was nowhere to be seen. Shen Jiu approached, carefully examining Shen Yuan from head to toe. His hair was ruffled, but otherwise he looked completely fine. Shen Yuan finished his painting and held it up to show Shen Jiu. It was a giant black blob. If Shen Jiu squinted, it looked faintly like a black moon rhinoceros python. But he doubted that was on purpose. "Baba, look," Shen Yuan said with a proud smile. Shen Jiu nodded approvingly. Very good line work. Crisp edges, good grasp of form and shadow, he bluffed. Then curiosity got the better of him and he asked, "Where is Lu Mingyan?" There was a thump and a rattle from the wardrobe against the wall. Shen Jiu eyed Lu Qingge, who showed no reaction. Shen Yuan pointed at the closet. Full of trepidation, Shen Jiu slowly went to the closet and undid yet another obnoxious child-proof lock. He noted as he did that these were much smaller than his own. Clearly, Shen Jiu had a much lower estimation of Lu Qingge's intelligence and had dumbed them down for him. Lu Mingyan was revealed inside, happily playing with a pile of Lu Qingge's robes. She threw a belt at Shen Jiu as he opened the cabinet door, and it snagged on his crown and dangled there. "Why is your sister locked in a closet?" Lu Qingge didn't even stop doing his exercises. "Shen Yuan did it," he explained. Shen Jiu turned to Shen Yuan. "We don't lock people in closets," he scolded, and paused and thought about it. "Unless they're being really annoying." He was actually a bit envious now that he couldn't lock in a closet. Shen Yuan nodded vigorously. "Well, that was fine then." Still, Shen Jiu eyed Lu Qingge and his completely oblivious, stupid face. "Perhaps we should attend these social practices," he said, full of dread and regret as he said the words. Lu Qingge finally stopped and turned to look at Shen Jiu. "If you like..." Sorry, hang on. I dropped something. Shen Jiu really did not. But also, he was never ever going to take on childcare for Lu Mingyan again, and leaving Shen Yuan in Lu Qingge's dubious care was also clearly not an option. Shen Jiu nodded, resigned. The belt hanging from his hair crown swayed in front of his face as he did. He yanked it out and the hair crown came with it, sending the hair tumbling free from its elaborate updo. Lu Mingyan really was a disaster for his outfits. Lu Qingge gaped at him. Ugh, how embarrassing. Did his hair look that crazy? Shen Jiu flushed under the weight of his stare. "It's just a hair crown. You still look fine," he told himself. Determined to appear aloof and ignore the gawking of Lu Qingge, Shen Jiu calmly sat himself down at the table. He studied Shen Yuan's pile of previous drawings. That one looks a bit like a new Yuan Chuan. Shen Yuan nearly set down his brush, walked over to the cheerful Lu Mingyan, still busily messing up Lu Qingge's robes, and shut the door on her once more. The baby-proof lock engaged with a click. Shen Jiu gave Lu Qingge a look. Are you going to keep her locked in the closet this whole time? Luchinga shrugged. She's happy in not breaking anything, he said calmly. With an attitude like that, Shen Jiu could see how she had fallen off a roof the first time they'd met. On the other hand, having handled Lu Mingyan for a day, he could understand the logic. In fact, Shen Jiu began to wonder if this was a regular thing for the Liu siblings. It would go a long way towards explaining Luchinga's frequent wardrobe malfunctions. Eventually, Lu Mingyan tired of being locked in the wardrobe and began to complain, so Luchinga freed her. She joined everyone at the table and was very insistent on painting on Shen Yuan's paper instead of her own. Shen Jiu could see why Shen Yuan had locked her in the wardrobe, and if he was not mistaken about the glint in Shen Yuan's eye, the boy was plotting something else in the same vein right now. You must be hungry, Yuan. Let's go home for dinner, Shen Jiu exclaimed with false brightness. Time to get out of here before a fight broke out. Lu Qingge looked up from where he was restraining Lu Mingyan by both wrists. Dinner will be ready. Dinner is arriving soon, he said. You should stay. Lu Mingyan tried to wriggle away, so he lifted her up to dangle her next to the table. She giggled furiously. I couldn't possibly impose, Shen Jiu said automatically, having memorized the script for polite meal refusal a long time ago. But why was this the script they were using now? What was happening? Before things could get any weirder, he scooped up Shen Yuan and briskly walked out the door. As he prepared to step on his sword and fly back to Qingjing, he turned and looked back at Lu Qingge's house. Lu Qingge and Lu Mingyan were framed in the doorway. Lu Mingyan was waving an enthusiastic goodbye, and Lu Qingge had also raised a hand in farewell. Shen Yuan wrapped his arms around Shen Jiu's neck and rested his head on Shen Jiu's shoulder. Home, Baba, he demanded. Heart pounding, Shen Jiu took to the skies. Alright, I need to reset this just real quick. Oh. There we go. I had to go reset it. The connection was a little spotty. Sorry. Okay. Chapter 5. Snacks. Shen Yuan is around 16 months old, and Lu Mingyan is around 18 months old. Special thanks to Mystery Teacup for the baby gate idea. Also, I wrote my first chapter ever 1 month ago, and now I've written almost just over 70,000 words. Hurrah! This time, Xing Qinghua sent over some strange new modeling clay alongside the latest baby-proofing attempt. It was an apology gift for the last several failures, according to the groveling Anding disciple that brought both items. Shen Jiu prodded the clay. It was soft and useless, just like Sheng Qinghua. He left it on the table and went over to supervise the boy installing the new baby-proof gate. The disciple began to sweat under Shen Jiu's penetrating gaze. Shen Yuan pinched off a piece of the clay and eyed it suspiciously as he squeezed it. Play-Doh? Shen Yuan asked skeptically. Modeling clay, Shen Jiu enunciated. Shen Yuan would not be developing a speech impediment on his watch. The disciple from Anding finished the gate installation and fled. Shen Jiu surveyed his work and nodded to himself. This would do to keep Lu Mingyan and Shen Yuan away from the private areas of the bamboo house. This time, Shen Jiu would be prepared. Lu Mingyan, that indescribable horror, would be defeated. And I said horror, not whore. Just clarifying, he's not calling a baby a whore. Aware that the terrible Lu Qingge and his shockingly more terrible sister would soon arrive, Shen Jiu rushed about the bamboo house, straightening everything, including his adorable son's hair and robe. Shen Yuan seemed utterly focused on the strange modeling clay. He could keep it. At least it was good for something. They heard Lu Qingge touch down and approach, tiny footsteps pacing alongside the large, confident strides. Shen Jiu struck pose number 3. I am too venerable to be bothered by the likes of you. Through the open door, he saw Lu Qingge approach. Lu Mingyan was running in circles around him. Every few steps, she would attempt to run off in a random direction, and he would put a hand on her head and steer her back to the bamboo house. Shen Yuan looked up from his clay experiments, saw Lu Mingyan approaching, and put his head on the table, groaning. Same, child. Same. But Shen Jiu was determined to show that he could host a better playdate than Lu Qingge. Everything was in its place and looked impeccable. Snacks had already been ordered through the kitchen and were scheduled to arrive soon. And most importantly, everything valuable had been locked securely away behind Sheng Qinghua's new baby gate, so if anything went wrong, then he would take it out on Sheng Qinghua's hide. Lu Qingge stepped inside the door and proffered a fan to Shen Jiu. You forgot this at my house last time, Lu Qingge explained. Shen Jiu eyed the fan. It was dirty and stained, with the painted paper shredded in places between the tines. That is Shen Yuan's fan, he said, eye-twitching. Did Lu Qingge really think the refined peak lord of Qingjing would use a fan like that? Shen Yuan perked up at the sound of his name, spotted the fan, and rushed over to take it back. In doing so, he left the clay on the table unattended, and Lu Mingyan made a beeline for it. Momentarily torn by indecision, Shen Yuan quickly and rudely snatched the fan and rushed back to use it to block Lu Mingyan from the clay. Mine! He shouted at her. Lu Mingyan ignored him and tried to reach around to grab some anyway. One of the parenting books had insisted on teaching the children to share. Another had said to let children learn to work out social problems by themselves. Shen Jiu eyed the 2 angry toddlers and decided discretion was the better part of valor here. So he and Lu Qingge stood by and watched as Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan went from trying to grab at the clay to outright brawling. Lu Mingyan threw Shen Yuan over her shoulder. Shen Yuan yanked at her hair and robes. Brings back memories, Lu Qingge murmured with a small smile. Shen Jiu pulled out his nice, clean, untorn fan and unfolded it in front of his face to hide his snicker. His first fight with Lu Qingge as a disciple had indeed been surprisingly similar. And their second, and their third. Shen Yuan gnashed his teeth at Lu Mingyan. No biting, Shen Jiu called out. You don't know where she's been. They continued to watch as the children's fighting escalated even further. When Shen Yuan went for Lu Mingyan's eyes, Lu Qingge waded in and pulled her out, denying Shen Yuan his well-earned victory. In retaliation, Shen Jiu took and stashed away the coveted modeling clay. Lu Mingyan had clearly lost to Shen Yuan's wily tricks, and would not be getting any spoils of victory just because her brother bailed her out. Except that when she saw Shen Jiu put away the clay, she began to scream, a high, shrill sound that went on and on. Shen Jiu watched, appalled. How could so much noise come from one small child, and ran to hide behind him? Both stared at Lu Mingyan as she threw herself to the ground and beat at the floor with tiny fists, kicking and screaming. Lu Qingge stood over her, arms crossed, looking bored. Should we? Shen Jiu began, then stopped, helpless. What was this? What were you supposed to do in the face of something like this? She'll get tired eventually, Lu Qingge stated calmly. This child? Tired? Not in Shen Jiu's experience, but then again, what she was doing now looked exhausting. Her face was turning an unhealthy-looking shade of red. During one of the all too brief pauses in the screaming, Shen Jiu heard a knock at the door. He opened it to reveal a disciple carrying the snacks he had requested. The screaming mercifully stopped as Lu Mingyan took in the sight of the food. No kanji this time. Shen Jiu was no fool. Now that they were older and could be reliably trusted not to choke on real food, kanji would never appear again in Lu Mingyan's presence. Instead, there were noodles, crackers, and pickled vegetables. While Shen Jiu directed his disciple to on the table setup, Lu Mingyan took heaving breaths and her face began to go from bright red to merely very pink. Shen Yuan continued to cling to Shen Jiu in case she resumed, but fortunately, she seemed to have been sufficiently distracted. The disciple hustled out, and everyone took their seats around the table. Lu Mingyan immediately dove for the noodles in the serving dish with both grubby little hands, and Lu Qingge brushed them away with practic ease to take a portion for her individual plate instead. Shen Jiu grabbed a sampling of food for Shen Yuan to eat, while Shen Yuan held his training chopsticks in a clumsy fist, but both paused to stare at Lu Mingyan as she took fistfuls of noodles, attempting to stuff them in her mouth and missed entirely. This sent loose noodles dropping all over the table and her robes. Acting like this was completely normal, Lu Qingge reached over with his chopsticks and plucked a loose noodle from Lu Mingyan's robes and fed it to her. As if in sync, the Shens drew out matching fans to hide matching expressions of disgust. "Do not ever embarrass me by eating like that," Shen Jiu murmured to Shen Yuan from behind their fans. "No," Shen Yuan replied, packing the appropriate amount of distaste into the simple word. As the spectacle continued, Shen Yuan decided he was hungry enough to eat in spite of the scene in front of them. Clumsy with the training chopsticks, he was nonetheless attempting to imitate Shen Jiu's elegance in eating. Shen Jiu approved, especially after seeing how much worse it could have been. After eating a small amount of the food, Lu Mingyan grew fidgety, then began to almost vibrate in her seat. "She needs to run around," said Lu Qingge, and took her to the grassy area just outside the bamboo house. Shen Yuan wrinkled his nose in disgust at the thought of exercise and continued to carefully eat. But when he heard Lu Mingyan's wild shrieking giggles, he was overcome with curiosity and went out to look and see what was happening. Lu Qingge was tossing Lu Mingyan up in the air, and she squealed with glee as she flew. Shen Yuan's eyes grew wide, and then he was running over, reaching up to Lu Qingge, wanting to be thrown as well. As Shen Jiu watched, Lu Qingge put Lu Mingyan down and took Shen Yuan and began tossing him up in the air. Shen Jiu was suddenly overwhelmed by a strange sort of dizziness. What was this feeling? Was he chi deviating? He checked his meridians, but they seemed fine. Across the yard, Shen Yuan threw up in Lu Qingge's face. Whoops! Lu Qingge went to clean himself up, and Shen Jiu loaned him some robes. Watching Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan by himself wasn't too bad when Shen Yuan felt too unwell to pick himself off the grass, and Lu Mingyan was stubbornly attempting to climb a bamboo tree. As she slid down the trunk once again, Lu Qingge emerged. Lu Qingge was better dressed than he'd ever been in his life, except perhaps for the ceremony where he became Bison Peak Lord. Back then, he had worn more elaborate clothing, but he'd also torn it in a fight on the way to the ceremony. Wearing Shen Jiu's green and white, he looked ridiculous. Yes, that was definitely the word to describe it. Lu Qing looked ridiculous, and Shen Jiu couldn't stop watching him because of how ridiculous he looked. Wearing Shen Jiu's robes, hair washed and wet and down, smiling as he played with Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan. Shen Jiu felt dizzy again, but no, his meridians were still fine. With Lu Mingyan worn out from her bamboo climbing failure and Shen Yuan worn out from the hard work of vomiting all over Lu Qingge, both were calm enough to tolerate being read to. One of Shen Qingchu's many parenting books had advised reading to small children, so he pulled out Flora and Fauna of the Northwestern Peninsula of the Demonic Northern Desert, Volume 4. As he read aloud about the 1,000-year golden icefish and its symbiotic relationship with the typical parasitic 1,000-year silver ice leech, Shen Yuan was rapt. Lu Mingyan, on the other hand, fell asleep in her brother's lap. "Rude!" "May I borrow that book?" Lu Qingge asked, interrupting the reading. "Also rude. Mingyan doesn't normally nap." Shen Jiu sighed and handed the book over. Shen Yuan made a sulky face, clearly resenting that Lu Mingyan was going to get to finish it and didn't even appreciate the privilege. But Shen Yuan took off while Shen Jiu bustled Shen Yuan inside. Shen Yuan attempted to open the new baby gate but couldn't get it to work. This one required an adult's height and hand span to activate. Ha! Defeated at last! Shen Jiu graciously but also very smugly unlatched the gate and let Shen Yuan past. Shen Yuan ferociously glared at it and shooed Shen Jiu away so he could slam the gate closed himself. Then he stomped off to bed for nap time. Shen Jiu graciously but also very smugly unlatched the gate and let Shen Yuan past. Shen Yuan ferociously glared at it and shooed Shen Jiu away so he could slam the gate closed himself. Then he stomped off to bed for nap time. Shen Jiu turned to leave, and the gate swung back open on its own. He leaned down to inspect it. The internal workings looked charred and melted. It now was very difficult to relatch, although it could still be done after a few minutes of struggle. Had Lu Qingge gotten annoyed and used chi on it earlier? It did sound just like the brute wrecking Shen Jiu's things just because he had gotten frustrated. Shen Jiu couldn't muster up his usual animosity at the thought. Something was definitely wrong with him. He'd have to go to Qian Kao to get that checked out. Lu Mingyan and Shen Yuan are around 2.5 years old. Chapter 6, Festival. The Liu siblings' background is still from Tossaway. With so many successful playdates under their belts, Shen Jiu felt ready to tackle going to the Mid-Autumn Festival together with the Liu siblings. It would enable them to skip that day's playdate, and Lu Qingge was turning out to be a surprisingly net positive in corralling the children. So going together to the Dragon Boat Festival would be more effective together, and that was definitely the only reason Shen Jiu was doing it. Shen Jiu knew he looked fabulous in his thematically appropriate 5 poisons embroidered hanfu. Shen Yuan wore the same thing in miniature, down to an identical hair crown and a new fan. Several disciples who had seen them together had squealed loudly enough that Shen Jiu's ears still faintly rang. They met up with Lu Qingge and Lu Mingyan on the road down to the town nearest Kangqian, not far from where the festival began. Lu Qingge and Lu Mingyan did not match unless you counted the grass stains. Shen Jiu graciously overlooked their dishevelment. As they approached, Lu Qingge tied a strap of fabric around Lu Mingyan's waist and secured it to his own wrist. When Lu Mingyan attempted to run off, Lu Qingge tugged her back to his side. Was that a leash? Best not to ask, probably. Knowing that Lu Qingge wouldn't have bothered, Shen Jiu pulled out the perfume sachets he'd made and tied them to Lu Mingyan and Shen Yuan's belts. Lu Mingyan was enraptured by the silk tassels on hers and played with it continuously. Lu Qingge smiled at the 3 of them, and Shen Jiu quickly stood and ushered them on as his face heated up again. Qian Kao had insisted nothing was out of the ordinary, but the frequency of Shen Qingchu's hot flashes and dizziness was increasing. Shen Qingchu was beginning to have serious doubts. Had Mu Qingfang figured out about the razor-winged blue hornets and decided to mess with Shen Qingchu's health in revenge? Call it paranoia, but Shen Qingchu wouldn't put it past the man. Well, his poison testing had come up negative, but that just meant Mu Qingfang was being extra subtle in his approach. As they approached the festival area in town, the merchants running the stalls all turned to look at the incoming immortals and their two small children. It was like they could smell the combination of rich and doting parents, and they practically frothed at the mouth to get Lu Mingyan and Shen Yuan's attention. Merchants shouted, and toys, masks, and candies were all thrust in their faces. Lu Mingyan smiled and giggled, fascinated by the options being proffered, and thrilled at being the center of attention of so many grown-ups. Shen Yuan, on the other hand, strolled along as though he was the wealthiest child in town, and this kind of attention was completely ordinary. Shen Qingchu remembered how he felt about rich kids like this when he had been the lowly street rat Shen Jiu. Purely out of resentment, he'd pickpocket the doting parents that followed after. Shen Qingchu discreetly checked his purse. Still there. He glanced over at the oblivious Lu Qingga, who was buying bamboo-wrapped sticky rice for Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan, and decided the man was on his own. Flashing that heavy purse so early in the festival was just asking to be robbed. Giving Lu Mingyan sticky rice meant he would deserve it. As the two children munched sticky rice, and Lu Mingyan, true to form, smeared most of it on her already dirty hanfu, one merchant tried to sell them tickets to see his menagerie. To demonstrate his exotic animals, he thrust a caged, blue-eyed black dragon in Shen Yuan's face. To Shen Qingchu's eye, that dragon was being very badly handled. The cage was too small, its scales were coming off in patches, and it was clearly very stressed by the noise and commotion of the festival. It certainly didn't bode well for the rest of the man's menagerie. Shen Qingchu carefully steered the group away. But Baba, the dragon is sad. We have to save it, Shen Yuan whined. Absolutely not, said Shen Qingchu, who could see where this was going and would cut this off before it started. Shen Yuan might be spoiled, but he was not going to get a pet dragon, no matter how pathetically needy the creature was, or how pathetically sadly Shen Yuan begged. Shen Qingchu had a finite amount of caring, and he wasn't about to spend any on a little beast just because Shen Yuan wanted it. Please, Shen Yuan continued to plead as Shen Qingchu pushed them on. And then Shen Qingchu came to a horrified stop because they had wandered a little too close to the red light district and someone was playing 18 touches. I want to put my finger through your hair from up here to way down there, the singer crooned. Shen Qingchu and Lu Qingga both turned bright red and quickly turned to return the way they had come. They were too late. Fingers through your hair, Mingyan sang out, loud and shameless in the way only the truly innocent could be. Shit. And then they were accosted by the obnoxious monk that always hung around the warm red pavilion. Shen Qingchu hadn't been back recently since Shen Yuan kept him so busy, but he and that monk had a mutual animosity that spanned years. Repent! The monk shouted in their faces as he rang his bell. Then he looked closer at Shen Qingchu. Oh, it's you. Acquired a child, have you? The man sneered down at Shen Yuan, who, to his credit, sneered right back up at him in a good imitation of Shen Qingchu himself. Got one on a prostitute from that brothel you favor, eh? Near I thought your absence meant you'd seen the light. Instead, you're taking in the spawn of whores. You're a disgrace, the monk spat. Shen Qingchu pulled Shen Yuan behind him and leveled a glare at the monk that should have set him on fire. Beside him, Lu Qingga also gathered Lu Mingyan close, then put his hand threateningly on the hilt of his sword. I prayed for my son in the bamboo forest of Qingjing Peak and found him under a bamboo leaf the next morning, Shen Qingchu said through gritted teeth. The spiritual energies of the mountain do work Oh my gosh, I'm going to read that over. That was butchered. The spiritual energies of the mountain do work miracles. Why don't you come experience it yourself sometimes? His tone implied that the miracle would end with the monk buried in Qingjing in a shallow grave to feed the bamboo. The monk, sensing that he'd crossed further into enraging Shen Jiu than ever before, hesitated. Then he saw the look on Lu Chinga's face. The war god of Kang Qian could be quite fearsome if he wanted to be, and he was certainly putting in the effort right now. Deciding not to take Shen Jiu up on his offer, the man retreated to harass the performer of that tawdry ballad instead. Reminded of the song once more, Lu Mingyan began to read "Fingers through your hair, fingers through your hair," humming all the while. Shen Jiu massaged his temple. "I'm sorry," he grunted out to Lu Chinga. The apology galled him, but it probably was his fault the monk had approached and harassed him. "He shouldn't speak to you like that. You're the peak lord of Qingjing. He should show you more respect," Lu Chinga said, outraged. "That's rich coming from you." Shen Jiu rolled his eyes and began to walk away from the red light area back to the festival, Shen Yuan clinging to him as his quiet and thoughtful shadow. An awkward silence followed. Lu Mingyan interrupted it to ask, "Gaga, what's a brothel?" Lu Chinga turned red and couldn't answer. Lu Mingyan tugged at his sleeve and whined, impatient to know. Shen Jiu explained, "It's a place where you pay people to be nice to you." At these words, Lu Chinga looked first surprised, then thoughtful. Shen Yuan piped up to give his input. "Luca, you should be nice to Baba. Then he won't go to the brothel." Lu Chinga went back to blushing again. "No, he started, then fell silent. "What a dirty mind you have, Lu Shidi," Shen Jiu teased quietly. Lu Chinga looked away and refused to respond. His ears were still very red. As they approached the busier streets once more, Lu Mingyan took Shen Yuan's hand, and they ran ahead to get the attention of the merchants once more. Shen Jingge lingered near Shen Jiu, keeping an eye out, but releasing a longer length of Lu Mingyan's child leash, giving them some privacy. "Why do you keep lying about where Shen Yuan comes from?" Lu Chinga asked quietly. "Oh, like you're so eager to share why you're the guardian of your sister? Why isn't she with your parents?" Shen Jiu challenged. "Mother doesn't want her. Said Mingyan was too difficult and she'd already done her time raising me. So she gave Mingyan to me to raise," Lu Chinga admitted without hesitation. "Why lie about why you have Shen Yuan? I won't judge you. I've learned better now." Shen Jiu opened his mouth to lie once more, then closed it. Lu Chinga's honesty made him want to try being honest in return. "His parents offered him to me as payment for a night hunt," Shen Jiu revealed. "And I knew if I said no, they would sell him to the next slave trader that passed through town. They almost sold him to the last one. They knew from what he'd offered how much they'd get for Yuan. So they traded him as payment to me instead." Lu Chinga just listened and made no comment. Shen Jiu continued to explain, the words coming out of him in a rush. "I don't want him to know. I want him to grow up thinking he was loved and wanted, even if it's a lie." Shen Jiu pushed back the old familiar bitterness. He knew what he was under the fabrication and costume of the refined Qingjing peak lord. He would always know. But Shen Yuan would not face that same self-doubt, not if Shen Jiu could help it. Shen Yuan would have everything, be everything, that the slave boy Shen Jiu could only dream of. Lu Chinga looked seriously at Shen Jiu. "It's not a lie. He is loved." Lu Chinga took Shen Jiu's hand. "By you, and by me." Lu Chinga's strong and calloused hand felt like an anchor in a world of chaos. So Shen Jiu held on to it. They followed after Lu Mingyan and Shen Yuan all the way to the small lake where the dragon boat races were taking place. "The boat with the red team will win," Luchinga declared at first glance. They did indeed seem to be the strongest, but... "The gold team," Shen Jiu replied. "Their drummer is superior, as is their synchronization." He cast a small smile at Luchinga. "I'll make it a bet, if you like." Luchinga grinned back. "What would we bet?" Shen Jiu's fingers twitched as he thought. Interlaced as they were with Luchinga's, the sensation was strange, but pleasant. Somehow, while he was distracted, the gold team made it to the finish line. The crowd around them burst into cheering. Blast. He should have thought faster. What kind of concession he could have gotten. When they turned to leave, Shen Yuan bolted through the crowd, using his small form to dart between the large groups and other families who had been watching. Luchinga body slammed a few unfortunate bystanders trying to follow, but was unable to keep up. Shen Jiu didn't have the space to draw his sword and fly above the crowd. What was Shen Yuan doing? Then, as soon as Shen Jiu asked himself that question, he knew. That brat. "The menagerie," he called out to Luchinga, who nodded. The man scooped up Lu Mingyan as Shen Jiu darted through the crowd back in the direction of the merchant with the dragon. He arrived just in time to see a rush of monsters and animals alike scurrying away from the merchant's tent as the man himself howled in fury. Shen Yuan was sneaking away from the tent. Shen Jiu caught him by the waist and used his longer legs to retreat much faster. When they were a safe enough distance away, Shen Jiu patted them down again until they looked completely unruffled, then began his lecture. Shen Yuan maintained his stubborn, annoyed look as Shen Jiu went on. "And it was good that you waited long enough that he was likely to have forgotten your interesting comments, but you should have developed a better escape plan." Luchinga and Lu Mingyan came upon them in the middle of this, and Luchinga raised an eyebrow at Shen Jiu. "What?" Shen Jiu said defensively. Luchinga shook his head, grinning. "Nothing," he said. "Let's go home." "First things first," Shen Jiu said, then held out a hand. "I need that leash." Shen Yuan sulked even harder as Shen Jiu tied the other end of Lu Mingyuan's leash to Shen Yuan's waist and then gripped the middle. The length was just long enough for everyone to walk unencumbered, but only just. Luchinga also held on to the middle of the leash, and this meant he and Shen Jiu were walking shoulder to shoulder, frequently bumping into each other. The hands clutching the fabric brushed as they walked. Shen Jiu thought of the closeness he'd once had with Qi Gua before Qi Gua had revealed himself as yet another person who just didn't care enough. They had been brothers once. As the four of them walked together, they felt like a family. Maybe Shen Jiu was starting to feel a brotherly attachment to Luchinga, like what he'd once felt for Yu Qingyuan. "What are you thinking about?" Luchinga asked in a low voice, using his free hand to trace the scorpion embroidered at Shen Jiu's collar. His face was unreadable in the dark. Up ahead, Shen Yuan muttered hair, and this set Lu Mingyan off again. "I want fingers in your hair, up here to down there," she sang shriek, the sound splitting the quiet of the night. Shen Jiu and Luchinga spread apart, but since neither one let go of their grip on the leash, everyone went tumbling. As he landed in the dirt, Shen Jiu realized his coin purse was missing. Some street rat somewhere was having a very good night. Well, that made two of them. Shen Jiu looked at his family and smiled. Hang on, quick sip. Chapter 7, Qi Gua. Notes: Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan are 5 years old. Yu Qingyuan was clearly struggling to find the right words to say. Shen Jiu just looked stolidly back at him, fan covering his mouth, expression not giving an inch. Shen Jiu was not going to yield, and he knew Yu Qingyuan would fold sooner or later. Shen Jiu had not offered tea as a pointed hint that Yu Qingyuan was not welcome to stay long. Since Yu Qingyuan was without something to occupy his hands, Shen Jiu could read volumes in the way that Yu Qingyuan's fingers writhed. He was nearing his limit. Shen Shidi, please. You cannot make a 5-year-old your head disciple. Yu Qingyuan finally burst out, looking pained. Shen Jiu sniffed. He is the most qualified candidate, he said. But he's so young, Yu Qingyuan protested. Can he even read? Shen Jiu gazed back, lowering his fan slightly to show Yu Qingyuan more of its disgusted expression. Of course he can read, Shen Jiu said. He probably knows more characters than you do. True, some of those characters are ones that Shen Yuan appeared to have made up entirely, but the pictographs and radicals made logical sense, so Shen Jiu just took it as yet another sign of his son's brilliance. Shen Jiu continued, he's a prodigy at the 4 arts. I've been teaching him for years now, and he's been doing simple qi manipulation since before he was 2 years old. He has already developed a rudimentary golden core. All of Shen Jiu's parenting books had advised against pushing children too hard academically. But Shen Jiu was done listening to their nonsense. And Shen Yuan had soaked everything up like a sponge, so clearly the books were all wrong and Shen Jiu was right. He never should have doubted himself. Is he mature enough to handle such a position? Yu Qingyuan asked skeptically. From the next room, Shen Jiu heard a rush of footsteps. Lu Mingyan dashed out and across the main living area, out into the yard, shrieking that the Play-Doh was hers. Shen Yuan ran after her and took her down in a flying tackle. They began to wrestle in the dirt, struggling to claim the colorful lump in Lu Mingyan's hand. Yes, Shen Jiu said, completely straight-faced. Perhaps not, but he certainly wasn't going to admit it. Lu Qingge came out, stopping as he neared Shen Jiu. Sensing the tension in Shen Jiu's shoulders, he stroked a finger along the nape of Shen Jiu's neck. Shen Jiu relaxed into the touch and gave Lu Qingge a nod and a smile hidden from Yu Qingyuan by the fan. Lu Qingge turned to watch the wrestling children through the open door. When Shen Jiu turned back to his battle of wills with Yu Qingyuan once more, the man looked completely flummoxed. His fingers were spasming with shock. Wait, are you and Lu Shidi? He began. Don't try to change the subject, Shen Jiu snapped. This is about Ah Yuan. He is qualified. Just because you think so little of me doesn't mean you should think the same of my son. Yu Qingyuan was still having trouble focusing. But you and Lu Shidi, he began, then stopped. When? Shen Jiu slammed his fan on the table. Are you listening to me, Zhangman Shixian? He snarled. You can abandon me like trash on the roadside, but don't you dare disrespect my son. He has earned this. This made Yu Qingyuan snap to attention. You are not trash. I would never abandon you, Xiao Ju. I didn't realize you thought that. I do respect you. Shen Jiu felt like a bowstring drawn taut, about to snap. Lu Qingge, whose presence he'd forgotten in the face of Yu Qingyuan's obnoxious nonsense, reached out and gently rubbed at his shoulders. The touch was distracting enough to pull Shen Jiu back from the precipice of his rage. Shen Jiu drew on all his patience. He'd had to develop a great deal of it in the years with Shen Yuan. When Shen Yuan had gotten into his etching acid and used it to paint the floor, Shen Jiu had remained calm. When Shen Yuan had run away from home, claiming he wanted to be an explorer and study dangerous beasts, Shen Jiu had not yelled. When Shen Yuan had gone to the beast-taming peak and jumped into the water with a snake-faced, fanged hydra, Shen Jiu had carefully refrained from beating the boy bloody for terrifying Shen Jiu out of his wits. Sect leader Yu Qingyuan was so much more infuriating than any child could be, even Lu Mingyan. But Shen Jingchu had a great deal of practice in patience now. He took a deep breath and focused on the reassuring warmth and pressure of Lu Qingge's hand on his shoulder. You left me at the mercy of the Chus and their torment. Well, you swanned off to become a great cultivator who couldn't be bothered to return for a little slave boy. Shen Jingchu's voice dripped with deadly venom. Don't you dare claim otherwise. Yu Qingyuan's wide eyes darted to look at Lu Qingge and then went back to Shen Jingchu, but he could say nothing. From the yard outside, Shen Jingchu heard a low series of thumps as Shen Yuan slammed Lu Mingyan's hand. From the yard outside, Shen Jingchu heard a low series of thumps as Shen Yuan slammed Lu Mingyan's head into the ground several times. This was followed by a bigger thump and a loud, forceful exhale. Lu Mingyan had knocked the wind out of Shen Yuan by body slamming him. Nothing concerning or out of the ordinary. Yu Qingyuan remained stupidly silent. Was this the Lingxi cave incident? Lu Qingge spoke up. Lu Shidi! Yu Qingyuan protested, horrified. Lu Qingyuan ignored him and turned to look at Shen Jingchu. He was locked up in there for a year when we were disciples. Right after he got out, he ran away, and he was very upset when he returned. Shen Jingchu looked at Lu Qingge in shock, then turned to stare at Yu Qingyuan. I failed you, Yu Qingyuan admitted, eyes wet with tears. Shen Jingchu pursed his lips and thought, but did you try? And because some habits die hard, he continued, use your words. Yu Qingyuan looked away. Yes, he said, quiet and reluctant. Lu Qingge resumed rubbing at Shen Jingchu's shoulders. There was a long silence as Shen Jingchu processed this. Because Shen Jingchu had, for so long, thought he meant so little to Qi Gua that Qi Gua had just abandoned him. It had solidified the idea that Shen Jiu had been useless scum, not worth the effort of saving. And that hadn't been it at all. Qi Gua hadn't left him there. He'd just been an idiot again. This was familiar territory. How many times had Shen Jingchu baited him or bailed him out from his mistakes when they were children living on the streets? And this time, Shen Jingchu hadn't been there, and Qi Gua had screwed it all up once more. Not unexpected at all, really, except for how stupid Qi Gua was to have hidden it from Shen Jingchu afterwards. I failed you, and you should hate me, Yu Qingyuan finally said. I don't deserve forgiveness. Shen Jingchu gave an annoyed huff. You don't get a say in it, Qi Gua, he sneered. It's up to me, not you. Yu Qingyuan was such an idiot drawing this drama out. For what? Self-flagellation? If Lu Qingge hadn't revealed the truth, Yu Qingyuan probably would have waited until he was dying to confess, or something equally insipid. Shen Jingchu's hand was trembling, so he reached over to take Lu Qingge's hand from his shoulder. He squeezed it, and Lu Qingge squeezed back. Yu Qingyuan looked like his world had been turned upside down. He was clearly at a loss for what to do. But seeing their clasped hands, he fixated on something a little easier to comprehend. Yu Qingyuan gaped at them. How long have you and Lu Shidi been together? Is it serious? Shen Jingchu opened his mouth to scoff at the idea of himself and Lu Qingge together, like Yu Qingyuan was implying. Then he paused and redirected. He wasn't above a little needling in revenge for Yu Qingyuan leaving him in the dark for so long. Plus, just because Shen Jingchu had forgiven Yu Qingyuan doesn't mean he'd stop picking on him. Why mess with success? Oh, we're very serious. We're giving Ayuan and Mingyan a sibling with the flower of fruitful coupling, Shen Jingchu said with a smirk. He squeezed Lu Qingge's hand in warning. Don't ruin this for me, Qingge. No, you didn't, Yu Qingyuan said, squinting at Shen Qingchu's solemn face, but his fingers twitched with uncertainty. I'm 3 months along now, Shen Qingchu said, unfurling his fan and raising it. Yu Qingyuan knew him far too well, so keeping his face serious was crucial to pulling this off. But with Yu Qingyuan already so rattled, this might just work. No, Yu Qingyuan said, slow and hesitant. Really? Shen Qingchu flapped his fan, careful to give nothing away. In the end, Yu Qingyuan stumbled out of the bamboo house full of shock. Too dazed to pay attention, he was quickly knocked over by the still tussling Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan. Shen Jingchu stood to see him off and then watched amused as he picked himself back up and took off, face still showing his complete befuddlement. The man was certainly in no state to continue arguing against Shen Yuan's appointment as head disciple. Victory, Shen Qingchu! When Yu Qingyuan was out of earshot, Shen Qingchu turned to chuckle at Lu Qingga. I can't believe he thinks we're lovers, Shen Qingchu snickered. How ridiculous. But when he looked at Lu Qingga, there was something intense and unreadable in the man's gaze. Shen Qingchu couldn't look away. Shen Yuan popped up in front of them, completely derailing Shen Qingchu's train of thought. Wait, you're not? Shen Yuan said, tipping his head to the side in confusion. Behind him, Lu Mingyan was jumping up and down in victory. The Play-Doh in her grip was completely filthy with dirt and stray bits of grass, and she had a red mark on her cheekbone that would certainly bruise, but she was grinning widely all the same. She sat down and started mashing more grass into the already mangled lump of Play-Doh. Shen Yuan ignored her and continued to stare at Lu Qingga and Shen Qingchu. Yuan, there are many kinds of affection, Shen Qingchu explained, leaning back to relax into Lu Qingga. Qinghe and I are good friends. Shen Qingchu quirked an eyebrow at this and crossed his arms. What an adorable imitation of Shen Qingchu's pose. Yay, we're back. Shen Qingchu lifted his fan to hide his grin. Shen Yuan hated it when Shen Qingchu didn't take him seriously, but he was just too cute. When he pulled stunts like this, Shen Qingchu just wanted to pinch those chubby little cheeks. Shen Yuan scoffed and went back to whisper to Lu Mingyan. That was definitely a plotting face he was making. Shen Qingchu made a mental note to train it out of him. The two children whispered back and forth, and there was definitely conspiring going on there. Still, Shen Qingchu wasn't too worried. He and Lu Qingga could outwit 2 5-year-olds. Both kids ran back to where Shen Qingchu and Lu Qingga were relaxing together. Play hide-and-seek with us, Lu Mingyan demanded. Shen Yuan nodded vigorously beside her. Say please, Lu Qingga reminded her. Please, Lu Mingyan whined, throwing herself at him and wrapping her arms around his neck to give him a hug. Lu Qingga huffed in amusement and looked at Shen Qingchu. I'm not playing, Shen Qingchu said, suspicious. The one time both adults had hidden during a seemingly innocuous game of hide-and-seek, these two rascals had made a run for it and almost made it across the Rainbow Bridge. Apparently, Lu Mingyan had wanted to watch the fairies at Xianshu Peak and had enlisted Shen Yuan's help to escape their watchers and get there. Shen Yuan's very obvious plotting face meant that whatever they were attempting now would undoubtedly be worse. Lu Mingyan was a force of chaos, was bad enough, but Shen Yuan was a methodical planner who reached new levels of troublemaking to achieve his goals. So Shen Qingchu watched, amused at having thwarted Shen Yuan's mysterious aims. Shen Yuan puffed his cheeks out in frustration before giving up and turning around to begin counting. Lu Mingyan took her brother's hand and they ran into the bamboo house. When he finished counting, Shen Yuan ran in after them. Shen Jiu kept one eye and ear out for trouble as he looked out over at the sunny day outside. They really had come a long way over the years. Back when he had first met Shen Yuan, he never would have expected things to turn out like this. And his blossoming friendship with Lu Qingge was an even bigger surprise. Every day he felt more strongly affectionate towards the man. It really was different than with anyone else in his life. Baba! Baba! Shen Yuan ran up to him and tugged at his sleeve. Yaner locked Gaga in the closet, and we can't get him out. Oh, was he being annoying? Shen Jingju suppressed a snicker. Lu Qingge trapped in a closet by two 5-year-olds. They went over to the closet in question. It was much larger than the one in Lu Qingge's house, since it had to accommodate Shen Jingchu's full and elaborate wardrobe. But it was probably still stuffy in there, since Shen Jingchu tended to pack it full with father-son matching outfits for every occasion. Best not to let Lu Qingge suffer too long. Shen Jingchu bent down to inspect the child-proof lock on the door. I thought you worked out how to get past all these years ago, he teased Shen Yuan as he squeezed the hidden latch that would unlock it. He opened the door to reveal Lu Qingge's wry smile surrounded by hanging green and white fabric. Thanks, Chu. Lu Qingge started, but then two forceful pushes took Shen Jingchu out at the knees and he stumbled forward into Lu Qingge. Fortunately, Lu Qingge's quick reflexes kept them both from smashing their faces together. He got Shen Jingchu and then the closet door slammed shut behind him. There was an ominous click and high-pitched giggles. Then, of all things, a locking array lit up on the door. Did you teach him that? Lu Qingge asked, shocked. They both knew it wasn't Ming Yan creating locking arrays that could stall peak lords. Shang Qinghua, Shen Qingchu growled. Shang Qinghua was terrified of Shen Yuan. When they had first met, Shen Qingchu had been distracted by an emergency and left Shen Yuan in Shang Qinghua's care for half a shi. When he returned, Shang Qinghua was shaking like a leaf and had almost certainly cried, while Shen Yuan calmly flapped his fan and watched smugly. At the time, Shen Qingchu had been so proud he'd taken Shen Yuan to the kitchens for some Tang Yuan. Shen Jingchu regretted their ever meeting now. Clearly, Shen Yuan had managed to bully Shang Qinghua into giving him materials and knowledge to pull off this stunt. There was more giggling and a loud crash from outside the closet. Oh no, what are they doing out there? Shen Jingchu groaned. An unattended Lu Mingyan in his house? Shen Yuan was not going to restrain her. The two only encouraged each other's willful tendencies. Stand back. I need to focus. Shen Jingchu snapped at Lu Qingge as he bent as much as possible to inspect the array. The space was limited, and fabric pressed back against Lu Qingge on every side. Stand back where? Lu Qingge said, amused. He was leaning back as far as he could, which was really not far at all. Trapped as they were, he was radiating body heat, and the space they had carved out was heating up quickly. Shen Jingchu could feel the heat of Lu Qingge's body burning through layers and layers of robes. This isn't funny, Qinghe. Qingwei, you're distracting me. Shen Jingchu hissed. He bent over further to look closer at the array, and Lu Qingge made a strangled groan as he was squeezed against the wall. It was far too difficult to focus under these conditions. Lu Qingge was just too distracting with his everything. Shen Jingchu squinted at the array, trying to identify the weak point. I could blast our way out, Lu Qingge offered. Do not ruin my clothes, Shen Jingchu protested. I've got this. Just let me... There. He injected qi into the array's weak spot with a careful finger, then applied more qi to melt that blasted child-proofing device from the inside. He didn't have much space or leverage, but he and Lu Qingge leaned against the doors and they burst open, leaving the two tumbling onto the ground into blessedly cooler, fresh air. For a moment, Shen Jingchu just laid there on the floor, Lu Qingge a crushing weight on his chest. Lu Qingge's breath was warm on his cheek, and it made Shen Jingchu's face tingle strangely. But then they heard another childish giggle coming from the other room. Lu Qingge and Shen Jiu both scrambled to their feet to find the kids and assess the damage. Shen Yuan had gotten into the fan cabinet again and replaced his cheaper fan with one of Shen Jiu's best. Lu Mingyan was right next to him, folding and unfolding them, and Shen Jiu trying not to scream, ruining the delicate creases. I'm going to lock you in the closet, Shen Jiu threatened as he loomed up behind them. They looked at him, then Lu Qingge dropped the fans and bolted out the open window. Shen Jiu and Lu Qingge gave chase in a divide and conquer that was by now all too familiar. They caught up with Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan by the quiet pond where the children were splashing about and pretending to drown. What were they playing at? They both knew how to swim. Shen Jiu rolled his eyes, but when they still wouldn't come out, he and Lu Qingge stripped off their outer robes and waded in after the reckless troublemakers. Shen Jiu snagged his struggling son while Lu Qingge grabbed his wayward sister, and they both trudged out of the pond and sat down at the edge, restraining them for a timeout from which there would be no escape. Shen Jiu circulated his qi to keep warm as Shen Yuan whined about being cold and wet. Wasn't that just too bad? Maybe you should have thought about that before jumping into a pond, Shen Jiu grumbled. He looked over at Lu Qingge to commiserate. Lu Mingyan always regarded having to sit still as the greatest of tortures, so Lu Qingge had his hands full keeping her from breaking free. His wet inner robe slipped off one shoulder in the struggle. They were plastered against his skin in many places, and pink flush skin showed through the wet translucent fabric. Shen Jiu stared at Lu Qingge's exposed shoulder, where dripping water from Lu Qingge's hair traced lines of tendon, bone, and very well-defined muscle. Lu Qingge turned to look back as though sensing Shen Jiu's staring, and his lips parted in surprise. A blush emerged high on his cheekbones. With the way he looked now, Shen Jiu wanted. Shen Yuan attempted to burst free. Shen Jiu tightened his grip. No escape for you, brat, Shen Jiu declared and focused on Shen Yuan, carefully avoiding looking at Lu Qingge again. Even after a timeout, both children were unusually wild and crazy for the rest of the day, putting Shen Jiu and Lu Qingge through all kinds of awkward difficulties. No doubt this was all orchestrated by Shen Yuan to further his unknown goals. Shen Jiu was so proud, but also so done. When Shen Yuan finally went to bed, Shen Jiu breathed a sigh of relief and followed Lu Qingge and Lu Mingyan out as they headed for home. Lu Mingyan had been exhausted enough by today's events to want to cling sleepily to her brother instead of ride the sword as usual. Lu Qingge was strong, so even though Lu Mingyan was 5 years old and growing, he held her sleepy form cradled in one arm like the weight was nothing. As they walked out into the front yard of the bamboo house, Shen Jiu watched Lu Qingge. The man shone silver in the light of the moon. I never felt this way about Jigua, Shen Jiu realized. This is something different. This is... Lu Qingge turned to look at him. I want to be more than friends, Lu Qingge said. Shen Jiu looked back. I think I want that too, he said, slow and uncertain. This was all uncharted territory, but then again, everything had been since the day he took in Shen Yuan. Shen Jiu closed the distance between them and leaned in. In Lu Qingge's arms, Lu Mingyan stirred. Gah, I'm tired. I want to go home, she whined. Shen Jiu huffed a laugh as he pulled back. Where will we find the time? He wondered aloud. We'll make it, Lu Qingge said firmly. Chapter 8. Epilogue. Shen Jiu and Lu Qingge reclined on the bed in Lu Qingge's house in Bison Peak. Lu Qingge wrapped his arms around Shen Jiu as the man snuggled into his chest, brushing away a stray lock of hair. They had kicked the blankets aside during their earlier activities, but stayed warm with the lingering heat of their bodies. You know, I heard teens' years were rough, but this has been really nice, Shen Jiu said as he relaxed into the hard planes of Lu Qingga's body. Shen Yuan and Lu Mingyan were old enough now that they didn't need much supervision anymore, and the extra private time had been very pleasant. Lu Qingga nodded and reached up to poke Shen Qingqiu in the nose. They're good kids, he said with a smile. Then he pressed a kiss to the delicate shell of Shen Qingqiu's ear. Shen Qingqiu quivered at the touch, then turned around to return the favor, with interest. And so Lu Qingga and Shen Qingqiu whiled away a pleasant afternoon because ignorance is bliss. A peek away, Shen Yuan was showing Lu Binghe, the newest disciple of Qingjing, all the best secret and hidden places for romantic taste. And Yan Lu Mingyan, also really likes this clearing. It's a great spot for sparring, but also at night it's really nice to lay back here and look at the stars, Shen Yuan explained cheerfully. Lu Mingyan was the best of the wives of proud immortal Demon Wei. Shen Yuan was determined that his sister and Binghe get their happy ending together. That Yan would put a stop to any vengeance plans against Shen Yuan and Shen Qingqiu was an added bonus, although Shen Qingqiu was far too preoccupied these days to do anything worth any kind of revenge. Lu Binghe was devastated. The kind, wonderful Shixian he'd been nursing a crush on was clearly already in a romantic relationship with Lu Mingyan, who was rumored to be a talented fighter and unrivaled beauty. How could someone like Lu Binghe compete with that? They clearly made a perfect couple. Lu Binghe wanted to cry. He knew he didn't stand a chance. Lu Mingyan sat up in a tree watching Shen Yuan and Lu Binghe. She had a far more accurate understanding of the situation than either Shen Yuan or Lu Binghe. In the shade of green leaves nestled hidden in the branches, she pulled out a notebook and charcoal stick. It was a bit weird to write porn about her stepbrother, but it never stopped her before, and it wasn't going to stop her now. And then there's a very, very, very cute little picture at the end. So I'm going to scroll. I'm going to show you. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see it better. Okay. Here we go. And this is also by Scholomancefan. I love it. Shen Yuan's like, okay, this relationship between Mingyan and Binghe is going to be amazing. And Mingyan's like, these two are so gay for each other. And Binghe's just heartbroken because he's baby. But that's the end. So there's an author note. Humor is tough to write, but so much fun. And I'm glad I tried my hand at a kid fic. And of course, as always, happy endings for everyone. Special thanks to the anonymous Redditor who inspired this by going on and on about how much they loved parental Shen Jiu. Thank you all to my supporters and commenters. Love you all. I hope you enjoyed the fic. Heart. But yeah, there's also another work that's collaborative babysitting for dummies if you are interested in more. But we're just going to stick to the original. So that's a little something for you to read on your own if you enjoyed this. But definitely go, say hey, leave a comment, leave a bookmark, leave a kudos for the author because they are amazing. And I believe they have some other stuff too. I think that's how I found this originally. 1 second. Yes, they do. So go check them out. They're pretty good. But anyway, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Scholomancefan, for letting me do this. Again, if I'm saying your name wrong, I'm so sorry. I'm trying my best. I'm sorry that I was kind of stumbling through some parts of this. I don't know why I had such issues with Mingyan's name today. I think because, like, I read a lot of Chigua, and yeah, no, I apologize. But anyway, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Happy holiday season, no matter what you celebrate or don't. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.